Welcome. I'm Lisa Bunnies, and my guest today is psychic explorer and psychic lawyer, Mark Anthony. Among other things, I'm going to be asking Mark for his thoughts on what's going on in this crazy world today and how we can use our intuition to navigate. Mark's bio and credentials are far too long to read off here, so check the description below. But in a nutshell, Mark is a fourth generation psychic medium and an Oxford educated attorney. He appears on TV and radio and co hosts the show The Psychic and the Doc. His latest best selling book, The Afterlife Frequency, has won multiple awards, ranked as one of the top books about faith, and was up for a Pulitzer. Welcome, Mark. We always have such fascinating chats, and I'm sure today will be no different. So good to see you.
Well, thank you, Lisa. It's always fun working with you. It's like we're just sitting around drinking coffee and tea and just two friends discussing really cool metaphysical topics.
Absolutely. And there are so many places we could go and will go. You're not only a psychic, but also a lawyer. Let's start here. Have there been occasions when your overlapping careers as an attorney and a medium have conflicted?
They never conflicted. They always worked together. And for the benefit of the listeners, I'm not actively practicing law anymore. My focus is on mediumship, my spirituality, my work as a near-death experience and afterlife researcher, and studying ancient mysteries. And being a medium and being a psychic medium is part of my skill set. And it's given me insights into cases. And people are always asking, well, do you always win your cases? Well, your cases are based, the strength of the case is based on the evidence. And certainly as a criminal defense attorney, if people ask, well, how can you represent somebody you know who's guilty? Well, if you only took innocent people, you probably wouldn't have very many clients. And so the strength of your case is based on the strength of your case and the evidence. So that's it doesn't make me invulnerable, but it certainly gave me some insights and really helped in many situations.
Yeah, I bet. So, did you ever use your ability as a medium in your work as an attorney?
Well, in my book, Never Letting Go, I explained how I was conducting jury selection on this one case. And what had happened, it was my client, I was a criminal defense attorney at the time. I started my career as a prosecutor. I was working for the state. And then I went over to criminal defense. And so I'm representing this big bruiser guy, and he got into a fist fight with another big bruiser at a bar. And he beat the daylights out of the other guy, who then filed charges. So that's very typical in the barroom brawl cases. The loser files charges, but it is a crime of violence. So prior to the actual trial starting, we have to select a jury. And jury selection is an extremely important phase of a trial. And most trial lawyers, and to an extent, I believe this as well, trials are won or lost at jury selection. And the prosecutor gets to ask the prospective jury panel questions, and then I get to ask them questions, because the point, Lisa, is to determine if people have biases, and then we get them excused before we, in this case, it would have been 6 jurors and an alternate. Okay. So now it was my turn to ask the prospective jurors questions. But the thing is, during the whole jury selection process, I kept getting drawn to this one woman, and I kept feeling this clamping around my throat, like I couldn't breathe, and this female spirit around her. And I'm like, okay, this is not the time to be doing this. I got to focus on my work. But it kept intensifying. So I stood up at the podium, and I started with a preliminary question after I introduced myself. I said, has anybody here or a family member been the victim of a violent crime? Well, lo and behold, that woman, her hand was shaking. I'll never forget her. She had this beautiful olive complexion. She was the sweetest looking person, and tears just started rolling down her cheeks. And she said, a year ago, my sister was in a foreign country when an escaped mental patient strangled her and then dismembered her body and threw her in the garbage like she was trash. Oh my God. I mean, in law school, they did not teach us how to deal with this. And I'm standing there, and the prosecutor, who was like a really annoying person, was even speechless. And all I can hear is my client going, dude, what are you doing? You know? And all of a sudden, I could see her sister's spirit, and the clamping around my throat intensified. And that's when I realized it was her sister coming through. And I literally had a foot in two different worlds. And if the listeners want to find out what happens, you're gonna have to get my book, Never Letting Go. but it's because seriously, because that's I explain in detail what had happened there. So there were times that spirits would come through that would help me quite a bit. There's a story that I would like to share. I was in another case, and it was a drunk driving case, and driving while under the influence, a lot of people, oh, it's just drunk driving. It's a very serious and dangerous thing to do. I mean, Mothers Against Drunk Driving was founded because too many mothers were losing their children, being killed by drunk drivers, or being killed because they were drunk drivers. And my client was not a very handsome person. Okay. I mean, with all due respect to him, he kind of looked like a garden gnome. You know, he had the long hair, and he was short, and he had this asthmatic condition to where he would, so he had this really weird breathing thing. I mean, and he had like, you know, and he was just a physical wreck. Okay. Nice guy. And this was one of the few clients that I knew was not guilty, because the police officer pulled him over, made him do the physical sobriety tests, and he was like, I can't do them, you know, just because the way he talked. And the problem is, the police officer looked like Tom Cruise in the first Top Gun movie. Chiseled features, the perfect black hair, the starch uniform, big shiny, and as jury selection in that case, it turned out the jury was all women. Okay. So here I am with Quasimodo, my client, and Tom Cruise from Top Gun is on the witness stand, and all the women are looking at him like, ah, you know, I'm like, oh, great, you know. And so the prosecutor was asking him, you know, well, what did you notice? And the thing is, my client didn't reek of alcohol, but because of his asthmatic condition, he had really bloodshot eyes all the time and all these allergies. So police said, whoa, he had distinctly bloodshot eyes, and he couldn't do the field test. And so it was my time to cross-examine, and all of a sudden I heard, ask him this. And before I did that, I knew, I said, you made a big deal about his bloodshot eyes. People can have bloodshot eyes for many reasons. Isn't that true, officer? That is true. He's looking at the jury and smiling, and they're all like, oh, you know. And I said, well, it could be because maybe they have allergies. I suppose that's possible. Possibly swimming from pool chlorine. That is a possibility. What about someone from crying? And that's when a spirit told me, ask him this, and he said, crying. I've never seen anyone with bloodshot eyes from crying. And the spirit said, ask him this. It said, are you married? And all of a sudden he goes, I never made her cry, like that. And then he caught himself. And every woman on the jury, he went from Tom Cruise to Count Dracula. They're all like, you know. And in that moment, I knew I had won the trial. And I said, no further questions, because I realized it wasn't going to get any better than that. So I sat down, and then they said, do you have any witnesses? Marco, defense, rest. The jury went back to the jury room, Lisa, and came back, swear to Almighty God, in 10 minutes, not guilty. 10 minutes.
Wow.
And so that was a time, because this guy wasn't guilty. He was being punished because he had a physical disability, because he had an unsavory, unattractive appearance, but he wasn't guilty, you know. And that was one of the times, and I could go on, we could do the whole show just on these stories, where a spirit came and said, when I was asking about the bloodshot eyes, ask him if he's married. And what happened was, he showed his true colors.
Wow. Wow. So just to repeat, which book is that in?
That Oh, well, the first jury selection story is in Never Letting Go. The story I just told, that's not in any of my books. That's
All
not
right.
in any of my, which makes me think I should write that, because I write for Best Holistic Life magazine. I write articles for them every month. We've got over 2 million, like almost 2.5 million subscribers now. And I write a monthly column. I just was voted, and I'm very humbled, very honored by this, as Visionary of the Year by Best Holistic Life, and I made the cover of the special June Award edition of 2025. And my radio show, The Psychic and the Doc, that I co-host with Dr. Pat Baccili, and she's a world-renowned behavioral psychologist. We just won 2 years in a row Best Radio Show of the Year. And so I invite all the listeners. You can call in every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, and all times either side of those. And I do mini readings for callers, and then Dr. Pat, using her amazing insights, helps people get the maximum benefit out of the messages. Oh, it's a great show. We've had a lot of really wonderful guests on, and people can find out about that by visiting my website, which is afterlifefrequency.com. But yes, being an attorney and being a medium has led for a very interesting career. And if I can, there's a story that I wrote about in the Afterlife Frequency where I did a reading for State Senator William Delgado of Illinois. And his son had died from a drug overdose from prescription medications. He was given 2 different prescriptions, which were not good in combination. It wasn't his son's fault. It was medical malpractice, okay? And so I did a reading for him, and he was very touched by what I did. Well, about a year after that, Lisa, I was doing a reading for this woman from Illinois, and her daughter had died under mysterious circumstances. She wasn't murdered, but her boyfriend wouldn't take her to the emergency room. He thought she just had a fever, and he was giving her aspirin while he went out to party with his friends. As it turned out, she had, I believe it was sepsis. And by the time she finally got to medical treatment, it was too late. And the coroner, okay, because whenever there's a death of questionable circumstances, the coroner, the county coroner comes in, and the coroner wrote in her report, she died of natural causes. Well, the coroner happened to be her boyfriend's mother. Yes, conflict of interest. Well, guess what? Illinois, and this includes every other state in the union, did not have a statute about a coroner's conflict of interest. I mean, we see this with regular doctors, with attorneys, with accountants, supposedly with the president. You know, if there is a conflict of interest, you're supposed to remove yourself from the case. And her daughter came through and said, the law must be changed, the law must be changed. And this woman that I was doing the reading for, the young lady's in spirit, her mother said, I've tried everything. I've called the Coroners Association, I called this, and she goes, nobody in the state of Illinois will help me. I said, wait a second, you said Illinois? I said, I know who to put you in touch with. I put her in touch with the state senator. After a really tough legal battle, Senator Delgado got past the coroner's conflict law, which is known as Leslie's Law, her daughter's name. And now other states throughout the country are adopting Leslie's Law. And this is what I refer to as spiritual synchronicity.
I'm glad that we've talked, or you're talking about the senator, because I do want to get into, well, without getting political or taking sides. After all, we want everyone to hear what we're saying without any knee-jerk reactions. But given that the rule of law is getting a sound thrashing these days, what's your take on what's going on as both a lawyer and a psychic? Well, what's happening here?
Well, certainly the world is in a state of flux right now, but when we take a step back, when has the world ever been utopia? And it hasn't. It hasn't. I mean, was it utopia during the Roman Empire? Well, no, not especially if you're one of the people getting thrown into the Colosseum or living under the weight of that. Was it utopia during the Dark Ages? Was it utopia during World War I and II and the Depression? So the world has always been very, very difficult and in flux. But right now, it does seem like the rule of law is in the separation of powers and in the constructs and the principles that the founders of this country set up are under a lot of stress and strain. And on one hand, we can say that this is very bad. On the other hand, maybe it's a good thing because it's testing the system to see if it works. Also, because of all these different opinions, it's going to lead to new and modifications of the law that may need to be happening. Because a lot of people ask me, well, what side of the political aisle are you on? And look, I've got people that are interested in my work on both sides of the aisle. I don't get political. And like you said, and that's, you're the same way. We don't get political because what we do is for everybody. All right. Some people are going to believe me in what I do. Other people are going to reject it, and that's their decision. And I think it's very important to have separation of powers and separation of church and state. I will say one thing, though, and maybe I'm going out on the ledge. Texas just passed a law that said the Ten Commandments needs to be, I guess, in every public place or especially in the schools. And I have a real problem with that. Not because I have a problem with the Ten Commandments, but the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, what's known as the Establishment and Free Exercise Clause, says, and I quote, "Congress shall make no laws respecting the establishment of a religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof." So by requiring the Ten Commandments, which is a Judeo-Christian set, of beliefs into the public school system, that is tantamount to government establishing a religion. Now, think about people who are Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, and other religions where this is ostracizing them and making them uncomfortable. And the founding fathers, they were flawed people. Okay, I mean, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, they owned slaves. But on the other hand, they were also a very far-seeing person. And Jefferson's one of the most fascinating people because he knew slavery was wrong. He wrote about it being wrong, yet he owned like 200 people. So there was this conflict. And, John Adams, who was a New England Puritan, who was always lecturing about the evils of slavery. So there was a balance there too. But the thing is, they were all students of history. And they had been observing European history since the collapse of the Roman Empire. And what did they see? One religious war after another. Catholics against Greek Orthodox, Catholics against Protestants, one branch of Protestants against other branches of Protestants. And at the time the United States came into existence, in basically in 1783 at the end of the American Revolution, with the possible exception of the Netherlands, the United States was the only Western country that did not have a religious head of state. In Great Britain, it's the king. Even today, King Charles, he's taken the title Defender of the Faiths, to be plural. France, Spain, all the Catholic countries, the Pope assigned a cardinal, a high-ranking prince of the Catholic Church, as the religious advisor and head of that. And all of the Protestant countries all had a religious head of state. And the founding fathers saw that the unending meddling of religion into politics always led to war, and it always led to persecutions of outgroups. The culmination of which was Nazi Germany exterminating 6 million Jews and 5 million other out groups.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for laying that all out. So then with sort of a metaphysical view of the world, what do you suppose, humankind is on the brink where we're going through this massive transformation. There's no denying it. What do you see as intuitively as what's going on right now with the rule of law being under attack?
Well, I think that traditional religions are declining. And if you look at the statistics out of the Pew Research Institute and other organizations that conduct these polls, and so when you get something like what Texas is doing with the Ten Commandments, it's kind of, there's nothing more dangerous than a declining empire, okay? Because they're always prone to attack and do anything to try to keep themselves afloat. But in loss there is gain, as in gain there is loss. And I believe in God, and I make no bones about it. Do I believe God is an erotic white man sitting on a throne smiting people with his scepter? Absolutely not. I believe God's a universal divine energy and intelligence that connects through all of us, that is based and related to quantum entanglement. But I think what's happening is, while people are becoming less religious, they're becoming more spiritual. And spiritual is the direct connect with God, where you realize you don't need a dogma, you don't need a book, you don't need a church. Now, if you feel that you do, by all means, because when religions follow the teachings of Jesus, the teachings of Buddha, the teachings of Krishna, the good teachings of the ascended masters, they're wonderful. And so that's what I think is happening as the rule of law is trying to interject religion into politics. What's happening is people are seeing, well, this is primitive, and what we need to do is be closer to God. And when people say, well, how do I find God? It's like, you already have. We're all interconnected. And with messages from spirits, and you brought this up in one of the interviews we did with Shift Network. Let's talk about messages from spirits. They're all about peace, love, and understanding. It's when people like these fanatical terrorists with their so-called spiritual advisors. Well, they're not spiritual, they're religious advisors, they're religious fanatics, because the divine power that you call God, and the Arabic word for God is Allah. The Hindi word for God is Rama. Okay, you go through, whatever you call God is God. It's a spiritual message if it's about peace and love and understanding and protection. You know that it's not spiritual. Instead, it's from the human ego created by the brain, edging God out. The ego, the me, when it's about anger, bigotry, hatred, violence, and destruction. And so therein lies the difference. So when people say, well, I'm hearing from God, it's like, well, God doesn't tell you to take a gun and go into a school and shoot people. God would tell you, give money to the homeless, help people, love yourself, love others as you love yourself, make amends, seek forgiveness, give forgiveness. That's what the messages from the divine are.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, I would like to sort of switch topics a bit. In your book, The Afterlife Frequency, which is magnificent, by the way, thank you. You introduce new terms and concepts about spirit communication based on science. And I love that you're one of the mediums working with Dr. Gary Schwartz, the University of Arizona at Tucson, on the Soul Phone project. And I know that a lot of it cannot be revealed yet because the research is still ongoing, but how does your scientific exploration connect with that work?
Well, I'm very honored to be one of the research mediums on the Soul Phone project. And what I can tell you is Dr. Schwartz, he's got, his team with the electrical engineers and the scientists that are working on technology to communicate with spirits. And the research mediums, we help communicate with spirits that are working with Gary Schwartz and help to validate some of the information that they've received through the soul phone. And it's really, really fascinating stuff. And what I find amazing is Thomas Edison, back in the 1920s, he did an interview for Scientific American magazine, I believe it was. And he said that, I believe I can create a device sensitive enough to communicate with discarnate intelligence, meaning a spirit. And he called it the spirit phone. But um, unfortunately, he died before he could complete it. And so Gary Schwartz had the benefit of a century of scientific developments, not just in quantum physics, but also in advanced circuitry and electronics technology, which will be and is capable of creating the technology sensitive enough to communicate with spirits. And what I've seen, I've been in the laboratory and I've seen it, it's like, whoa, really, really cool. So what the objective is to get to the point where the creators of the soul phone don't have to legitimize it, the actual device will. I do believe, Lisa, within our lifetime, we are going to have this miraculous, this incredible technology.
Yeah, yeah. And I know when I first heard about the Soul Phone Foundation, I was like, all right. I mean, I'm open-minded and I would love for these things to happen, but it just sounded a little wacky to me. But the more I looked into it, and again, with your work, I mean, you've developed the term the electromagnetic soul. So there is a scientific basis for all of this work. So talk about that a bit, if you would.
The electromagnetic soul, after a lifetime of being a medium, and in my practice as an attorney, I had to work with scientists quite a bit and forensics. And then in my personal injury practice, I worked a lot on head injury cases. So I had to study the human brain. And when I left the practice of law and started focusing strictly on mediumship, I was like, well, how is this possible? How am I able to do this? And then all of a sudden, everything I worked on with the brain started making sense. We know from faith, and I've been studying God since I've been a child. I wanted to go into the clergy. I've always been fascinated with different belief systems and religions and perceptions of the divine. Every belief system teaches us, Lisa, that the soul, the spirit, the who and what we are, pre-exists the body, comes into the body, moves on after the body dies. The first law of thermodynamics and physics teaches us that energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. Neuroscience, the study of the human brain, teaches us that the brain has an electrical field. We can measure the brainwave frequencies, and even though the brain is only 2% of the body's weight, it uses over 20% of its electromagnetic energy. So I developed the term the electromagnetic soul to describe what we really are, which is pure consciousness, a soul, a spirit that is eternal electromagnetic energy. I mean, if physics is telling us energy's always been here, neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another, and religion talks about God and the soul as always was, always will be, but they've been saying the same thing. And now we're beginning to see that they're not diametrically opposed. They really are in harmony. And so the soul, the electromagnetic soul, the EMS, is a coherent energy field. And when we die, think of that energy field is like a drop of water, which leaves the brain, and the brain's like a computer hard drive. It didn't create the soul, it merely hosts it. So when that brain crashes, in other words, when we die, that hard drive dies, our soul gets uploaded to this other frequency. And we are capable of communicating with these souls. They're amazing. Working with spirits and spirit communication is just, it's such an honor. I mean, I thank God every day for this ability to be able to make connections between people here and their loved ones in spirit to help ease the burden of their grief, to help gain insights into people's lives. And the thing is, it's not hocus pocus or magic. And as the work that Gary Schwartz is doing and others in the field of near-death experience research and survival of consciousness, it's based on sound scientific principles. And that's why I developed the electromagnetic soul theory to explain what that principle is.
Yeah, yeah. And a question that comes to mind as you're talking, because as you said, you do NDE research as well. One of the most fascinating things to me is hearing from people who've had NDE saying that when they're on the other side, they see colors that don't exist in our physical world. And have you heard stories of this? And if so, talk about that.
Oh, yeah, have I heard stories about that. In fact, my manager, Rocky, a couple years ago, she went in for a routine procedure and then she died on the table and they had to put a respirator on her. And she said that she thought it was a dream that she was standing by a brook. And she said there were flowers and colors all around her that she'd never seen. And she wanted to cross the stream, but an intelligence told her you can't cross the stream. And she came out of this. And she thought it was just a dream. And then we were at IANS, International Association for Near-Death Studies, and she was explaining this to Dr. Evan Alexander, and he hugs her and he goes, "You had a near-death experience." And she said, "Well, I just thought because I worked with Mark, maybe I was jumping to a conclusion." He said, "No, that's what it is." You see, the normal human eye can see 1 million colors. Now the reason that we're able to see color is because of the structure of the retina. And in the retina, there's what's called cones. And we have three cones, red, blue, and red, blue, and green. And so we can see these million colors. But there are certain women, and it's because of the two X chromosomes, can see 100 million colors because they have an abnormal gene, which I don't like the word abnormal. I think it's a super gene, which gives them an additional cone that's yellow-green. And so they can see an entire array of colors that people who are not tetrachromats can see. They can see 100 million colors. You can be a tetrachromat and not even know it, because unless it's specifically like you would look at something and that's just the way you see it. Like if I pick this up, all right, it's yellow, but for a tetrachromat, this may be a yellow that I can't even possibly begin to fathom. So take the electromagnetic soul out of the human body. When we're in the human body, we're limited by our physical structure. So our eyes are designed with the three cones to see white light and what's there. But once you're an electromagnetic soul, and this happens during a near-death experience because you're not seeing with your eyes, you're seeing with the EMS, you are now able to perceive the entire electromagnetic spectrum. And you're going to see a lot more than 100 million colors. And that's why people who have near-death experiences talk about these colors they can't even begin to describe. And so this is not just some fanciful hocus pocus. This appears to coincide with the fact that our physical perception is very different from what the electromagnetic soul is capable of perceiving.
Right. Wow. And then this, of course, brings up many more questions. The first one is that you're explaining that some people, women, can see things that others can't. Does this also correspond to some people have our psychic abilities while we're in the physical? Some people see spirits. Other
Right.
people simply sense them or smell them. Is this what we're talking about here? Our ability to sense different frequencies? How does that work?
We all have the same basic physiology, but there's variations. For example, with tetrachromats, they have this unusual genetic gene, which gives them an extra cone in their eye so they can see a wider array in the electromagnetic spectrum. And in spirit communication, there's two main receptor areas. One's at the bottom of the rib cage, that's the diaphragm, or actually just below it is the solar plexus. And the solar plexus is the second most complex bundle of nerves outside of the cerebral cortex in the body. And there are scientists who are calling it the second brain. I mean, an octopus has 9 brains, one for the head and one for each arm. So other species have more than one brain. And this is where we pick up on emotional feelings. Like when you say people feel things, ever hear gut instinct? Where do you think that comes from? Okay, every mom has that gut feeling. Okay, women are good with their women intuition. You feel it in your stomach. Talk to military, feel it in the gut. Okay, that's where these expressions come from. The next area is the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is behind the center of the forehead. And for our friends that do yoga, that's the third eye chakra, the indigo chakra. And so about 4.5 to 5 inches behind the center of the forehead, there's a very tiny gland, the smallest gland in the human body. It's between the size of a grain of rice and a lima bean. Yet it's the most mysterious, one of the most studied, and one of the most misunderstood or least understood glands. It regulates our circadian rhythms when we're tired, sleepy, hungry, amorous. It secretes melatonin and controls our circadian rhythms when we're energetic, when we're sleepy, when we're tired. It regulates brainwave frequencies, and recent discoveries, well, they're about 20 years old now, so not so recent, have found that there's calcite and magnetite crystals in them, which when exerted to pressure generate an electromagnetic field. In other words, Lisa, we got a TV studio in our head, and that's where we receive the information of a technical nature. In other words, visions, I see it, I hear it, I understand it, and the sensory receptacle is the solar plexus.
This is all so very, very fascinating. I've got so many questions, but I wanted to ask also in your book, the Afterlife Frequency, you talk about the collective consciousness. And I'd really like to talk about what's going on with the collective consciousness. How do you define that and what's up?
Think of our brain as the computer hard drive, and that our EMS, our electromagnetic soul, is not created by the brain. It's merely hosted by it. And that's why, like, when I communicate with spirits of babies that died in utero or in infancy, they're immortal living beings capable of perfectly intelligent and very complex communication. We tend to associate the body with the soul, and that's not the case. So when we physically die, think of the EMS as like a drop of water which leaves the body and plunges into this eternal sea of souls. Now, it's a frequency thing. So basically, we're quantum leaping to a higher frequency, but it's easier to picture our soul as a drop of water. So once we plunge into this eternal sea of souls, then you're still you. Okay, you're a coherent EM field, but now you're linked to other spirits that are linked to other spirits that are linked to other spirits. And that's why spirits can come through and they'll see past, present, future events. They can bring forth information that far exceeded the scope of anything that they knew here in this world. And so the collective consciousness, is this God? And I believe this may be God. And the collective consciousness isn't just limited to Earth. It appears that it transcends dimensions and can be interconnected with the collective consciousness in other dimensions. I would like to stick closer to planet Earth because it's easier for us to understand. But for example, I'll be doing a reading for somebody that will come through and start giving very complex medical information. And my client will say, well, my grandmother, she only had like a 6th grade education. She didn't know any of that. Well, maybe here on planet Earth, she had a 6th grade education, but as an electromagnetic soul patched into the collective consciousness, think of it like the cosmic internet. She knows a heck of a lot more than than we do here.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. And this, I think, is a beautiful sort of precursor to my next question, because the Now podcast is all about stepping into our power now at this powerful transition point that humanity finds itself at. We really can make a difference in humanity's future. And I'm wondering, how do you find this playing out in your own life? What is your spiritual message for the world?
It was presented to me by the spirit of my mother a couple weeks after she passed. And it's an interesting story, but I'll get right to the message. The message is that what I'm supposed to be doing, or my mission in this life, is to help people understand that the divine power we call God exists, that the afterlife, heaven, nirvana, happy valley, whatever you would like to call it, exists, that our electromagnetic souls are immortal living beings, that humans can communicate with souls, and that we will all be reunited with our loved ones in the light we call God when it's our appointed time to leave this world. So it's a 5-point message. And once again, I remember when that message came to me and I'm like, seriously? I'm supposed to do this. And then my doubts gave way to, that's why I'm here. And so, when people think about God, do I know exactly what God is? Of course not. I don't think anybody really does. Religions, create constructs. God's not a neurotic white man sitting on a throne with a scepter. You didn't give 10%. That's a medieval constructs. And the reason people then created that is because they were depicting God as a male, as a king, as an authority figure, as somebody you looked up to and venerated. Whereas I believe more along the lines of what Nikola Tesla said, is that what one person calls God, another calls the laws of physics, which is an energy that flows through us, always was, always will be, everywhere, all at once, which is what all religions say God does. That heaven, the other side, exists. I know it does. I communicate with it all the time, which begs the question, does hell exist? No. Hell's here on earth. If you don't believe me, look at Gaza, look at Somalia, look at just people living on the streets, wondering where their next meal is coming from. Hell is here on earth. When we're released from this material world dimension and we quantum leap into a purely energetic state, then we're free of all that. Certainly we can communicate with spirits. I believe every one of your viewers has probably had a dream where they felt they had a conversation with somebody who had died, a loved one who had died. Or you just feel sometimes that, gee, it feels like my mom is around me. Or you smell a familiar scent that makes you think of your grandfather and there's no source for it anywhere. These are all different types of contact experiences, okay? And we'll all be reunited in the light. It's one of the things near-death experiencers love to talk about, is when they leave their body, they see people that they know who died. And the people are always really happy. They look great. Everybody looks great. They all look like they're in their 20s and they're physically healthy, and it sounds great, And we will all be reunited at one point. But why are we here in this world? Is it to be the best we can be? I think it is. I think that instead of looking at misfortunes and challenges, look at them as obstacles that we must overcome. And we're given chances every day to do something positive for ourselves, for other people, for the environment. And that's what it's all about. It's learning to harmonize and live as an individual, but realizing we're part of something much greater.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. And of course, brings up questions. You mentioned hell. And I think that a lot of people use Hitler as the example, but that's too pat, and that's going down a rabbit hole I don't want to discuss. But let's say that somebody was horrifically abusive to their children. I mean, just violent and awful. There are people who do absolutely abominable things to others here. And I agree with you that they don't go to hell per se, but I think a lot of people here in on Earth feel like there's got to be some kind of punishment. There's got to be some kind of reckoning. So, what are your thoughts on that version of hell, as it were?
Well, the Hindus and the Buddhists don't believe in hell, but they do believe in reincarnation. And so everything you do is going to come back to you, because in the legal system, I certainly saw a lot of very despicable people that always seem to get away with it, always sort of slide through everything. But we're also only seeing a very small snippet of their existence, because as Gary Schwartz's wife Rhonda, friend and fellow medium, said, we have one life and it's eternal. So we go through a series of lifetimes. So we're on the afterlife frequency, then we come into this world, then we go back to the other side, we come into this world. So there may not be hell, but there is reincarnation. So my advice to everyone is be nice.
So there is hell to pay eventually.
That's what my belief is. There are people who give detailed accounts of a prior life, and there's several that I've studied and discussed where it's usually a child who starts describing something of a lifetime that didn't happen that long ago, and everything the child says can be objectively verified, and that child has zero reason to know anything about that. Real quick, there's Ryan Hammonds. He was born in the Midwest to a Baptist family. And one day, he's like 3 or 4 years old, he says, Mom, I used to be somebody else. I lived in Hollywood. I danced on Broadway. That's how I started my career. I was married 5 times. I lived in a street with the name Rock on it. And I had a swimming pool, and I really liked that life. Now, children have active imaginations, but his mother started keeping a list and notated 230 things on that. Then one day they're going through a book on old Hollywood, and he points to a picture and goes, "That's me." Well, it was a picture from a 1932 Mae West film, and the person that he pointed to wasn't given a name in the book. And that's when they brought in Dr. James Tucker from the University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies. He got a film historian on it. It was an uncredited extra whose name was Marty Martin. He was married 5 times, started his career as a dancer on Broadway, lived on Roxbury Lane in Beverly Hills in a nice house with a pool in it. I mean, they found so many things right down the line. Okay. So when I get these people like, oh, there's no evidence, it's like, well, then you're not studying it. Okay. And I could go on and on. There's cases from all over the world where people are remembering prior lifetimes with astonishing detail. And this lends to the credibility that energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another.
Wow. Yes. Thank you. That's a great story. I'm going to be looking that one up. We're almost out of time here. I want to make sure that we mention again your website, afterlifefrequency.com. What will people find if they visit you there?
They'll find out, well, how to tune into my weekly live stream show, The Psychic and the Doc. You can find out about purchasing my books, scheduling a one-on-one reading with me, or my online light circles, all my tour events. That's why I invite you also, when you go to afterlifefrequency.com, sign up for my newsletter. That'll keep you up to date. I'm constantly on tour. I've got several dates throughout the country in 2025, and we're already booking 2026. So there's also a resource called Grief Management. And if you're coping with loss, there will be things there that can be very helpful for you. And if you know somebody who has recently lost a loved one. I invite you to go to the grief management page on afterlifefrequency.com, because I wrote a blog, the things to say and the things not to say to someone in grief. Okay. A lot of times people will come, oh, he's in a better place. Do not say that. Does the parent really want to hear that the child they love so much who died is in a better place? You're young, you'll meet somebody else. Does somebody really want to hear that her husband died? She'll meet somebody else. And the thing is, when you say things like this, you don't mean to be unkind. You think you're doing the right thing. Whereas the things to say, I'm here for you. I don't know what to say. That's better than he's in a better place. Or tell a story. You know, I always liked your mom because she always made me feel so welcome every time I came to your house. She was such a great lady. That's what people want to hear. Sometimes a hug is okay, or just, I love you. And as cliche as it may be, I'm so sorry if you're lost. That's a good thing to say. And so that's one of the resources that you can find on afterlifefrequency.com.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for offering that. Wow. And thank you for spending some time with me today, Mark. I knew this was going to be a fascinating conversation. It always is. We could go on for hours, but obviously time ticks. Do you have any final words, or do you feel like we've covered enough for one day?
You know, look at it like this. Every day that you're alive is a gift. And many days it may not feel that way, but every day that you're alive is an opportunity that can open a new door. And if a door closes and you say, why'd that door close? It's because what was behind that door was not the path you were supposed to take. Another door will open. So look at every day that you're alive as a gift.
Beautiful. Thank you. Beautifully stated. Wow. Thank you again, Mark. I want to remind everyone I've been talking with psychic explorer, psychic lawyer, and psychic medium Mark Anthony. Thank you for being with us today. Thanks for listening. Check out Castle Gate, a novel based on my own ancestral healing journey, at lisabonis.com. In 1921, 4 men set off from Scotland to the United States. Will Garrock, his brother Pete, his son Willie, and his nephew Thomas, all coal miners. They left behind the miners' rows and the nationwide mining strike with its soup kitchens. Their destination was Castlegate, Utah, where they had kin to welcome them before sending for their wives and children. They prospered in America, working in one of the finest mines in Utah. Until that tragic day, March 8th, 1924. Disaster struck. 3 explosions trapping 171 men inside. Rescue crews worked tirelessly for days, but sadly, they could not save a soul. Women were widowed and children were orphaned, and some never recovered from their broken hearts. Castlegate is the true and tragic saga of a Scottish family whose dreams of finding their fortunes in the bountiful coal mines of Castlegate, Utah during the Prohibition era explode in one of the most devastating mine disasters in American history. Learn more at lisabonis.com.